The boy I defended at 12 is the man who waited 15 years to love me back. Some people say you can't go home again. They're wrong. Sometimes, home is where your heart has been waiting all along. The day I drove back into Maplewood, I made myself a promise: I would not cry anymore. I had cried enough for one lifetime. Enough for a marriage that crumbled like old paper. Enough for the woman I became, small, silent, apologizing for taking up space. Enough for the dreams I packed away in boxes I couldn't bear to open. At 32, I was starting over. Again. My parents had retired to Florida, leaving me to rent a cramped apartment above Main Street, the kind with slanted floors and windows that rattled when trucks passed by. Everything I owned was crammed into a U-Haul, and as I hauled boxes up the narrow staircase, I tried not to think about how my life had become so small. But then I smelled it. Coffee. Rich and dark and inviting. And beneath it, the scent of old books, that particular vanilla andust smell that wraps around you like a hug. It was coming from downstairs. The next morning, I told myself I just needed caffeine. But the truth? I needed to feel something other than hollow. When I pushed open the door, a little bell chimed, and I stepped into what felt like a dream. Exposed brick walls lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Mismatched armchairs clustered around small tables. Plants cascading from hanging pots. Fairy lights strung like constellations across the ceiling, casting everything in a soft, golden glow. The chalkboard menu behind the counter read, "Espresso yourself, life's too short for bad coffee." For the first time in months, I smiled. First time here? The voice was warm, like honey in tea. I looked up, and my breath caught. The man behind the counter had the kindest eyes I have ever seen. Dark and thoughtful, framed by laugh lines that suggested he smiled often. His hair was slightly messy, like he ran his hands through it while reading. He wore a faded Henley and an apron dusted with coffee grounds. When he smiled at me, it felt like sunrise. I just moved in. Upstairs, I stammered, pointing vaguely at the ceiling. Well then, welcome home, neighbor. His smile widened. Alex. This is Chapter V Coffee. Emma, I said. Emma Harrison. Something flickered across his face when I said my name, recognition, maybe? Or nostalgia? Emma Harrison, he repeated softly, like he was tasting the words. It's nice to meet you, Emma. The way he said my name made me feel seen for the first time in years. I told myself I wouldn't become a regular. But the next morning, I was back. And the morning after that. Alex remembered my order by day 3, oat milk latte, extra foam, a dash of cinnamon. He always saved me the window seat, the one where the afternoon light pooled like liquid gold. And the books, oh, the books he would leave on my table. Never with a note, just strategically placed. The Night Circus when I looked particularly lost. Braiding Sweetgrass when I seemed fragile. Station 11 when I needed to remember that beauty survives even endings. How do you always know? I asked him one rainy afternoon. He glanced up from steaming milk, that gentle smile tugging at his lips. I pay attention. We fell into an easy rhythm. Some days we talked for hours, about how Maplewood had changed, about why he had opened this café. Book saved me, he said simply, about my failed marriage, though I kept the worst parts locked away. Other days, we said nothing at all. I will read. He works. And the silence between us felt like comfort. But there was something else, too. Something unspoken. The way his gaze lingered just a moment too long. The way my heart stumbled when our fingers brushed exchanging change. The way he laughed at my terrible jokes like they were poetry. I tried to ignore it. I am not ready, I told myself. I am broken. Am too much. I am not enough. But my heart wasn't listening. Everything changed on a Tuesday in October. I was curled in my window seat, pretending to read but mostly watching Alex shelve books, when a woman burst through the door. Alex. She was laughing, waving her phone. I was going through old photos and found that picture, the one from middle school. She didn't wait for him to respond. She turned to me, eyes bright with mischief. You're Emma Harrison, right? You still live in town? I blinked. I just moved back, actually. Oh my God, you have to see this. She shoved her phone in my face. The photo was old, slightly blurry, the kind taken on a cheap digital camera in 2008. A school cafeteria. A crowd of kids in the background. And in the center, a 12-year-old girl with frizzy hair and a fierce expression, standing protectively in front of a thin boy with glasses, lunch tray clutched to his chest. Me. My heart stopped. That's the day you told off Marcus and his friends, the woman said. Do you remember? They were picking on Alex, calling him names, and you just marched right up and shut them down. Alex talked about it for years. The cafe tilted. I looked up slowly, and Alex was standing frozen behind the counter, a book still in his hands, watching me with an expression I couldn't name. Alex. My voice came out as a whisper. Alex Chen? He set down the book carefully. Took a breath. And smiled. Took you long enough, Emma. The woman left. The other customers filtered out. And suddenly it was just us, the cafe settling into that golden hour quiet, dust motes dancing in slanted sunlight. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice trembling. Alex came around the counter slowly, like approaching something fragile. Because when you walked in here, you looked like you were already carrying the weight of the world, he said softly. I didn't want to add to it. I didn't want you to feel obligated to remember me, or to be someone you used to be. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. You stood up for me when no one else would, Emma. That moment made me believe I was worth defending. That I mattered. His voice cracked slightly. You have no idea what that meant to a kid who spent every day trying to be invisible. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't do anything special. Anyone would have. But they didn't. He shook his head. You did. And I never forgot. So you've just been. What? Waiting for me to figure it out? No. He smiled sadly. I was just grateful to know you again. Even if you never remembered. Something broke open in my chest. I'm sorry, I whispered. I should have remembered. I should have. Emma. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. You don't owe me anything. You never did. I'm just glad you came home. And in that moment, standing in that little cafe with fairy lights and books, and the ghost of who we used to be, I realized something. He hadn't been waiting for me to remember him. Had been waiting for me to remember myself. After that, everything changed. We stayed late shelving books, talking about everything we'd been and everything we wanted to become. He told me about the years after I left, how had struggled, how had found his way, how had built this place from dreams and determination. I told him about my marriage. The real story, this time. How I had slowly disappeared, piece by piece, until I couldn't recognize myself. How leaving felt like failure and freedom all at once. You're not broken, Emma, he said one night as we sat in the darkened cafe, fairy lights twinkling above us. You're rebuilding. There's a difference. When did you get so wise? I asked through tears. When I stopped hiding behind silence. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. You taught me that courage looks like showing up even when you're scared. Especially then. I turned my hand over, lacing my fingers through his. I'm terrified, I admitted. Me too, he said. And smiled. But I think that means we're doing something right. We took it slow. Coffee dates that turned into long walks. Comfortable silences that turned into late-night conversations. Gentle touches that turned into lingering embraces. Alex never pushed. never rushed. He let me set the pace, let me find my footing. But I could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at me like I was sunrise and poetry and every beautiful thing he'd ever read about. One evening, as we locked up in the café together, he stopped me at the door. "Emma, I need to tell you something." My heart was hammered. "Okay." He took a breath, nervous in a way I have never seen. "This isn't just nostalgia for me. This isn't me holding on to some childhood memory of the girl who was kind when no one else was." He met my eyes, steady and sure. "I've liked you since I was 12 years old. But I like who you are now even more. The woman who's brave enough to start over. Who reads in the window seat and makes terrible puns and sees the good in broken things." His voice softened. "I'm in love with you, Emma Harrison. And I needed you to know." The world stopped spinning. And I did the only thing that made sense. I kissed him. It wasn't fireworks or falling stars. It was warmer than that. Safer. Like coming home after being lost for too long. Like finally breathing. When we pulled apart, I was crying. "I love you too," I whispered. "I think I've been falling for you since that first cup of coffee." He laughed, pressing his forehead to mine. "Best $4.50 I ever earned. But healing isn't linear." A few weeks later, I started pulling away. Old fears crept in, whispers that I was too damaged, too much work, that I have lost myself again. Alex noticed. Of course he did. "Talk to me," he said gently one night. "Please." So I did. I told him everything. The parts of my marriage I have been too ashamed to say out loud. How I had become small and quiet and apologetic. How I was terrified of disappearing again. "What if I lose myself?" I whispered. "What if I become someone I don't recognize?" Alex was quiet for a long moment. Then he took my hands in his. "Emma, I fell in love with your voice. With your opinions and your laughter and the way you see the world." His eyes were fierce with certainty. "I don't want you small. I don't want you to be quiet. I want you exactly as you are, loud and messy and beautifully, unapologetically you." He squeezed my hands. "I love you. But love shouldn't cost you your voice. Ever. And if I ever make you feel like it does, I need you to tell me. Because you deserve someone who celebrates every part of you, not just the easy parts." I broke down crying. Because no one had ever said that to me before. No one had ever loved me like that. I took some time after that. A few months to work on myself, to go to therapy, to remember who I was outside of anyone else's story. And Alex? He gave me space. Not because he didn't care, but because he did. "I'm not going anywhere," he told me. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." And he was. 6 months later, on a spring morning that smelled like rain and new beginnings, I walked back into Chapter V Coffee. Alex was behind the counter, restocking pastries, humming along to the jazz playing softly overhead. When he looked up and saw me, his entire face lit up. "I was starting to think you have forgotten me," he teased, but his voice was gentle. "Never," I said, walking toward him. "I just needed to remember myself first." He smiled, that beautiful, sunrise smile, and without asking, poured me an oat milk latte with extra foam and cinnamon. "Welcome home, Emma." I took the cup, warmth spreading through my hands, my chest, my entire being. "I'm ready," I said. "If you still want this." "Want us?" Alex came around the counter, closing the distance between us, and cupped my face in his hands. "I've been ready since I was 12 years old," he whispered. And he kissed me like a promise. A few weeks later, we decided to take a weekend away, nothing fancy, just a cozy cabin in the woods, a break from reality. We watched my favorite series, curled up on a worn couch. We talked for hours. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. We fell asleep tangled together, the TV still playing softly in the background. It was perfect. Simple. Us. But when I got home, something felt different. I had been feeling off for a few days, exhausted, emotional, a strange flutter in my stomach I couldn't explain. Then I realized, I was late. My heart stopped. I stared at the pregnancy test for what felt like hours, hands shaking, mind racing. Positive. Oh my God, I whispered to the empty bathroom. Oh my God. For the next day, I avoided Alex completely. My mind spiraled, we just got back together. We're still figuring this out. What if he's not ready? What if this scares him away? What if he doesn't want kids? By evening, I was sitting on my apartment floor, knees pulled to my chest, phone buzzing with his unanswered texts. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. A knock. Emma? I know you're in there. Please talk to me. I opened the door, and Alex took one look at my tear-streaked face and immediately stepped inside. Hey, he knelt in front of me, hands gentle on my shoulders. What's wrong? Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. Together. The word together broke something open. I'm pregnant, I blurted out. Silence. Alex's eyes went wide. His mouth opened. Closed. And then, the biggest, most radiant smile I had ever seen. His voice cracked. Really? I nodded, fresh tears spilling over. I'm so sorry, I know this is fast and we just figured things out and I don't want to trap you. Emma. He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could feel. He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could feel his heart racing against mine. You're not trapping me. This is. God, this is amazing. I pulled back to look at him, searching his face. You're not scared? Terrified, he admitted with a shaky laugh. Absolutely terrified. But also? He cradled my face in his hands, eyes shining. So happy I could burst. Really? Really? He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, my lips. Emma Harrison, I want everything with you. The messy, scary, beautiful everything. And if that includes a tiny person with your eyes and my terrible jokes, then I'm the luckiest man alive. I laughed through tears, and kissed him, and felt something I'd thought was lost forever. Hope. A week later, we got married. Nothing fancy, just us, a courthouse, and 2 witnesses Alex asked from the café. I wore a simple white dress I found at a thrift shop. He wore his nicest button-down and looked at me like I had hung the moon. I want to be with you through all of it, he said as we signed the papers. As your husband. As a father. As your partner in every way that matters. Even the 3 a.m. cravings and feedings? I teased. Especially the 3 a.m. cravings, he said solemnly. I make excellent middle-of-the-night pancakes. I laughed, and he kissed me, and I realized. This was my happy ending. Not because everything was perfect. But because I had found someone who loved me through the imperfect parts. Some people say you can't go home again. But I did. And waiting for me there was the boy I'd defended at 12, now the man who defended my heart at 32. The man who taught me that sometimes, the greatest love stories aren't about finding your missing piece. They're about finding someone who reminds you that you were whole all along. Chapter V. Coffee is still there on Main Street, fairy lights twinkling, books lining the walls. And on quiet mornings, you can find us behind the counter, Alex making lattes, me with our daughter on my hip, both of us exactly where we belong. Home.